Okay, and we're back for another alcohol marker review. This is the 168 set of alcohol markers by AceLayer. And as you can see, they have a cool carrying case and they have this small brush tip. Wait a second. That's not flexible at all. Oh my god, what? These don't have brush tips? Are you serious? Sometimes it is so hard to tell from the pictures on the screen if they are actual brush tips or if they are just using the alcohol brush tip buzzwords and actually have bullet nibs. Okay, well, these are going back and I'll have to get some other kind of marker for this review. Oh, Illo hue markers. I think I've seen thumbnails of people using them before. So, yeah, I guess let's get these.
Many months later.
Right, so that was a while ago. Anyway, here are the Illo hue markers. They come in a 36 set, which is a respectable number of markers, and they also, much like the lying markers I had before, have a neat case that if you turn the lid backwards actually makes a cool stand to hold your markers out for you. So that's cool. Anyway, let's start with the swatches. There is a pretty good range of colors for blending, but I do find the skin colors look a little bit, which is a common problem between alcohol markers. When I was in high school, I had this problem with my set of Prismacolor markers, actually. The peach looked like neon, and anyone I colored with it looked like they had literally been dipped in radioactive goo. Unfortunately, this is much the same. There's one that's alright, which is probably the one I'll use to color whatever image I do for the Fineliner test. But anyway, moving on, for the bleed test, it only went through the one standard sheet of cardstock, so that's all you need for a backer sheet. It didn't go on to a second or third sheet, as some have in the past. On to the blend, I was actually very pleased with the blending of these ones. The red, orange, yellow gradient ended up being quite pretty. The complementary color gradient did fine, though it was a little choppy at the transitions, but it's the more difficult of the two gradients, so I'm not mad at it. And the push test did fine. The light pink did push away the dark purple, and it did even deposit a little bit of color, which is what I'm always looking for in a color push. For the reactions, there is no colorless blender, so I'm skipping that for the moment since I have to go find my Copic colorless blender for that test. And instead, first we'll do acetone, and honestly, between this and alcohol, it's nothing to write home about. Once again, at first, it seems like it's gonna make some really cool effects, but by the time it dries down, there's really not much at all. The dark green is still pretty flat. Same with the water, which is pretty typical. It didn't have any effect on the alcohol ink. I've only had a couple of markers be affected by water as it is anyway. Like I think literally 2 by this point. As for the Copic Blender, again, take it with a grain of salt since it is a different ink formula, but it did okay. It made an interesting sort of cloudy gradient rather than being able to do much of an actual push. And it did appear to stain the tip of my Copic colorless blender, which, as you know, I hate stain tips even if it doesn't affect marker performance. It's just a personal pet peeve. Onto the colored pencil test. This is another alcohol marker that seems to like blending with the oil-based Faber-Castell colored pencils over the wax-based Prismacolor colored pencils. I seem to be finding more and more of those, whereas when I started this series, it seemed like every marker preferred blending with Prismacolor way more than the Faber-Castell. I don't know, just an interesting thing that I noticed. And finally, it's down to line weight variation. These brush markers do fine with variation. Though you'll notice that these brush tips are very short, which is what I thought the AceLayer markers had when I was judging by the pictures on the Amazon.com website. And while short brush tips are perfectly fine for coloring because they do give you that line variation, I do prefer a larger brush tip personally because it's hard to fill in larger spaces unless you use the chisel tip, which usually results in like blocky streaks unless you really oversaturate the paper with ink, and it's just not my preference. But perfectly serviceable as far as brush tips go. And with that, it's on to the Fineliner test. After throwing down a sketch, I'll use my standard 8 inking pens, which in order of inking on this image are Higgins India ink with my Kachikawa Comic Dip pen and a size G nib, followed by Prismacolor illustration marker in size 0.8, a Zebra signing brush pen in fine, Copic multiliner in size 0.5, Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen in size F, Unipin pigment fine liner in size 2, a Staedtler pigment liner in 0.5, and the Sakura pigment pen with the PN style nib. As always, I waited an hour for the inks to dry before I erased the center sketch and started coloring.
La 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 la. Wake up in the morning, rolling over, looking over at you. Clothes are scattered all over the room. Oh, what did we do? Don't know how it happened, it just happened. We were laughing and I think I might have leaned like, is this alright? Oh, but you didn't mind. My bad. This is probably a bad idea, and I know we shouldn't take it here, but now you're in my bed, looking at me like that. No, don't look at me like that. I mean, it's kinda common sense, and nobody's catching feelings. Still gonna hang all weekend. We can just call it what it is. Da 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 da. But we're just testing out the tension. And nobody's catching feelings. Still gonna hang all weekend. We can just call it what it is. Yeah. Blame it on the whiskey, yeah, that pushed me into kissing your lips. But to be honest, probably would've done it. Oh, without a sip. Oh. This is probably a bad idea, and I know we shouldn't take it here, but now you're in my bed, looking at me like that. No, don't look at me like that. I mean, it's kinda common sense, and nobody's catching feelings. Still gonna hang all weekend. We can just call it what it is. Da 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 da. But we're just testing out the tension, and nobody's catching feelings. Still gonna hang all weekend. We can just call it what it is. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da da da. I know you shouldn't. I know you should. Da 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 da. But we're just testing out the tension, and nobody's catching feelings. Still gonna hang all weekend. We can just call it what it is. This is probably a bad idea, and I know we shouldn't take it here, but now you're in my bed, looking at me like that. No, don't look at me like that. I mean, it's kinda common sense, and nobody's catching feelings. Still gonna hang all weekend. We can just call it what it is. Da 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 da. But we're just testing out the tension, and nobody's catching feelings. Still gonna hang all weekend. We can just call it what it is.
For these markers, I found that most of the liners were perfectly fine. However, I did experience minor smudging with the Zebra brush pen, the Faber-Castell, and the Sakura Pigma PN of all markers. Usually the Zebra and Sakura Pigma give me the least amount of trouble during these reviews, and India ink gives me the most amount of trouble. But I guess we're in a Bizarro world situation. I do think the color variety could be a little better in this set. You'll notice that to shade Yoko's skin, by the way, this is Yoko from Gurren Lagann. Yeah, to shade the skin, I used a really pale blue violet instead of the darker skin tone. It's a trick I use sometimes to add darker, more interesting or like moody shadows to images. But this time it was because the only color I had to shade the skin. Also, another problem I didn't even really realize until I started coloring this is there's no black in this set. Like, Yoko's top is black with red fire on it, and I had to use the dark gray instead because I just didn't have a black. Which, like, shocked me. I feel like that's like a really standard color, which is maybe why they didn't include it. There's so few colors in this set that using up a space for essentially what you can do with a fine liner is maybe a waste, or maybe they thought it would be a waste, but it just surprised me. Anyway, I also didn't bother with any alcohol or acetone drips in the background because the reactions there were so underwhelming, and yeah. This set is alright, but I would have liked to see more natural looking skin tones and more varying colors, I guess. I will always choose skin tones over having shades of the standard colors. I feel like if you have a set of standard colors and then you have grays, a couple of grays, and skin tones, you'll be fine. But skin tones are really important to me because I draw a lot of people. Someone who doesn't draw a lot of people probably wouldn't care. Maybe I'm being a little bit picky, but I usually like to have 3 of each color, a base, a tint, and a darker shade of each one to get a really good depth of shadow, but as this set is only 36 markers, the limited number of colors was a little bit of a bummer. Also, the small brush tips were totally killing me, especially when I was filling in the large midsection of skin. I noticed that as I tried to fill in large sections, the brush tip tended to dry up, and I tended to find myself waiting for it to refill before I could continue, which I found very annoying because I'm extremely impatient. But the tips didn't fray or degrade, so they are certainly durable enough, thankfully. I think if you had an additional set of a few skin tones to round this one out, it would be serviceable for someone just starting out. Though I do recommend some of the others I have reviewed more, such as the Fine Colors set. But yeah, stay tuned for my rating cards at the end as always. Please subscribe if you like alcohol marker reviews. I've been trying to get one out every month this year, and I've pretty much accomplished this goal, so that's exciting. But anyway, until next time, I'll see y'all later. Bye!